Hey guys, so when I was a Christian, I was told and thought that the resurrection of Jesus was an absolute fact. It was historical. All right, it must have happened. I mean, there were so many eyewitnesses, and how many people could see something and it not be true? I mean, the Apostle Paul wrote in Corinthians about there being over 500 people who seen the risen Christ. I mean, that's a lot of evidence, right? Wrong. Okay, so exactly what is an eyewitness? Well, an eyewitness obviously is someone who literally seen something with their own eyes at the time that it was taking place. Do we have eyewitnesses to the resurrection of Jesus? No, we don't have a single eyewitness. What we have is an account written in a book about there being eyewitnesses. We do not get to question these eyewitnesses. We don't get to see these eyewitnesses. These eyewitnesses existed about 2,000 years ago, okay? If they existed at all. So is that really that convincing that a book says that there were 500 eyewitnesses of Jesus' resurrection? Nope, doesn't cut it. I mean, the book of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, where Paul talks about these 500 eyewitnesses that seen the risen Christ, that book wasn't written for a couple of decades after Jesus died on the cross. Right? It was not written immediately afterwards. It was written a couple of decades later. Okay? And obviously, I mean, we don't ever get to actually know if that is true. Christians just assume it's true. I get it. But it's very weak as far as real evidence is concerned. Imagine going into a court of law and having an attorney stand up and say, well, you know, we have 500 eyewitnesses to this event. And the judge says, well, that's great. Let's bring them in here one at a time so we can interview them. But lawyer has to tell the judge, no, can't interview them. Judge says, do you know their names? No, don't know their names. When did this occur? Oh, 20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago it occurred. Okay. All right. This is real flimsy evidence. All right. It's not evidence that is worth taking seriously. Okay. Now, it's one thing if we are to consider that Jesus was a man. Okay. I mean, that's conceivable, of course. Why? Because we know men exist. So there's nothing unusual about that, men existing. All right? But it certainly is unusual for men to rise from the dead and to walk around the earth. That is highly unusual, if ever, that such a thing has ever taken place. Okay, so that type of belief would have to require some really strong evidence, not just a story that someone wrote 20 years after the fact that there were 500 eyewitnesses to something happening. Just not very strong. I hate to say it, Christians, but that's really not good evidence. Right? Eyewitnesses themselves can get things wrong. But we don't even know if these eyewitnesses even existed. It's just a story that we read about in an ancient book. All right. We actually have people who say they were abducted by aliens. Okay, and these eyewitnesses who say they were abducted by aliens and were eyewitnesses, we can still interview them today. Some of them go on the radio and on television talking about their accounts of being abducted by aliens. And yet, it's kind of far out, so we don't just jump on the bandwagon, right? I mean, we don't just assume that they're telling the truth, right? Because the claim is extraordinary. All right, well, the resurrection of Jesus is quite an extraordinary claim. All right, and saying that there were 500 eyewitnesses 2,000 years ago, that was written about in a book by Paul, right, who never seen the risen Christ himself. The only thing he reports is that he had a vision of Jesus, right? But here he is in Corinthians saying there were 500 people who seen Jesus. If you buy that, if that's what you need to believe, if that's strong enough for you to believe, go for it. But not me. I'm not believing a man rose from the dead because an ancient book said he did, and because an ancient book claims that 500 people witnessed this resurrection. That is not good evidence, folks. Just kind of pathetic, really. See you next time.